welcome to the 2024 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. My name is Max Williams. I'm a second-year MBA here at MIT Sloan. We are looking forward to a great conference here this year. We did not have a college sports panel last year. Obviously, there's been a ton of change in the space over that last year, so we're really looking forward to this one. Before we hop in very quickly, we'll do some couple logistics things. We'll do about 45 minutes on the panel, last 10 or so for audience Q&A. If you would like to submit a question, you can do it via the app, the Cadence app. Just navigate to the panel, New Generation, Next Era of College Athletics. You'll see it right there. I'll be in front filtering all the questions. So if you wanted to submit a question for the last 10 minutes, that's how you do it. We have a great panel today. We have Martin Jarmond, the athletic director at UCLA. We have Tommy Gray, COO of Altius Sports Partners. We have Val Ackerman, commissioner of the Big East, and Brian Higgins, senior vice president, business development at the NCAA. Our moderator is the esteemed Warren Zola, and we are really looking forward to this one. So again, 40 minutes or so for the panel, last 10 minutes Q&A, and with that, Warren, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Max. I want to start off by thanking Jess and Daryl, the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, for having a panel discussion on college athletics. Obviously, there's a lot going on, and we're not going to get to all of it if we stayed here until Wednesday, but we'll do our best to cover the highlights. I also want to thank Max and the students. The work that gets done to pull off a conference of 2,600 people, the logistics, everything else, kudos to the students and the organizers for this, to bring you what we hope is a lively discussion. Now is arguably the most consequential time in the history of college sports. The NCAA was founded in 1906, and when you look back and think about what's happening right now, the decisions that are being made now and in the next couple of years are going to radically change how all of us enjoy college sports. NCAA litigation, conference realignment, NIL, the potential for athletes to be employees are all radical shifts, and this group of experts is going to help us discuss what the future holds. The purpose of today's panel is not to look back on how we got here. We've had enough of that over the past decade or so. What I want to do and what the panel would like to do is look forward. What are some of the solutions? What are some of the challenges? Where does this industry go? Because the purpose of college athletics continues to be critically important. Sports provides educational opportunities that are transformative in teaching athletes and the students of these colleges life skills that we cannot recreate in a classroom. The ability to get up when you get knocked back down, to work with the team, to handle diversity, that's the value of sports. There are over 1,200 schools at the NCAA, about 65 or so in the Power 5 or 4 as we're turning into. It's a big business. The NCAA estimates that Division I athletics on a whole generates about $16 billion a year. That's larger than 3 of the 4 domestic pro sports leagues. Only the NFL generates more. They bring in around $1.25 billion directly to the NCAA, of which a preponderance of that comes directly from March Madness. At the state level, 40 of the 50 highest state paid employees in this country are college coaches. There are 11 coaches who receive over $9 million a year in annual salary, including one who's getting paid that not to coach this year. Ohio State brings in about $250 million a year in revenue, and there are 40 schools bringing in over $100 million. This is the 18th year of the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. In 2006, the Big Ten had 12 schools. Now we'll have 18 this year. The ACC went from 13 to 17. The SEC has gone from 12 to 16. And the Pac-10 went from 10 to 2. Finally, there's a lot of lawsuits that have impacted this industry. Since 2006, Bloom, O'Bannon, White, Jenkins, Alston, all have played an impact. And right now there are current cases. House looking at lost NIL and broadcast revenue. The Dartmouth men's basketball case claiming for unionization for the athletes. Carter looking for caps on compensation. Johnson, the Tennessee UVA case on NIL rights, and there's a bunch of employee status, to say nothing of the Florida state lawsuit against the ACC. All of which leads me to, this is the time that this industry needs to recalibrate. Where does the industry want to go? It is critically important to all of us who are fans of college athletics. And with that, I'm going to now stop talking, and we're going to have a chance to listen to the experts. Brian, since you are representing the NCAA, after 20 years as a management consultant, focused on complex projects, both in private and public sectors, how are you and the senior management team at the NCAA preparing for the future?
Thanks, Warren, and thanks everybody for coming and for the conference. We have a new president of the NCAA, former Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker, and he brought some of us along with him to do exactly that, to look at what it is in the future. And anytime you do a strategic scan of a business, you look at your strengths and your weaknesses. On the strength side, football and men's basketball are incredibly popular. As Warren said, they generate the lion's share of all the revenue, and they're awesome products. People love to watch them, and we need to continue to care for those sports to make sure that people can still enjoy them. We also have an incredibly differentiated set of products, to talk about it like a business, in our women's sports. Women's basketball, volleyball, softball, gymnastics, ice hockey. We have the premier women's athletic competitions, annual athletic competitions every year. And the interest in those is exploding, and that's a huge strength of ours and provides a lot of opportunity for financial growth, but also for growth in fan engagement and athlete experience. So we need to continue to focus on that. On the weaknesses side, at the national office, we need to do a better job of serving our members and running our own operations. And we're doing a lot of stuff to leverage the scale of the NCAA to make sure that we can provide better services for our members. One example, starting this August, every athlete, Division I, II, and III, will have post-eligibility insurance on injuries that they incur while they're student athletes. That's something that you can only do with the scale of a national organization. Insurance just works better with scale. So we want to do more stuff like that to help people spend less on volleyballs, on computer software, stuff like that. That's an example of how at the national office we can serve our members better. So we need to build on our strengths, improve on our weaknesses, and obviously there's a bunch of regulatory and rulemaking stuff that thankfully I don't have to get too involved in, but those are important questions that we need to resolve.
That's great, and I really appreciate you mentioning women's sports. I think when you think about college athletics, and specifically basketball, the most high-profile college basketball athlete we have in the country is Caitlin Clark, and I don't think there's a close number two. And that's something that is a result of college athletics. And Title IX, as we're in our 52nd year, but I think that needs to be recognized. Val, you entered college athletics a little bit before Brian, and you are running a major conference that doesn't compete in football. And how is your conference and your members taking a look at the future and how to prepare yourself, and also recognizing that a new administration has come into the NCAA, and they've come with it with fresh ideas and proposals and ideas on how to move this industry forward?
Yeah, thanks, Warren. And great as well to be here today, so thanks to the organizers. So it's sort of, history has repeated itself a bit with the Pac-12 because it was the Big East. Yeah. 15, 20 years ago, that was hit hard by the defections of schools, principally to the Atlantic Coast Conference.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I talked about that earlier. As Boston College was caught up in that as well. So the group of schools that I represent, is very much, what's happened in the last few years is very much resonating with them because they were there too, and then made the move, which they did, to leave football out of it. We are, I can't complain, a bit out of the football fray right now with respect to realignment. We've got a pretty stable situation. Right now, we're able to focus our energies on basketball and the 20 other sports that we sponsor. I agree with Brian that there There is a fragmentation here among the sports themselves. I mean, we've got, just to try to, you know, for those of you who are sort of trying to make sense of all of this, and we appreciate your trying to do that because we're trying to make sense of it as well. I mean, if you've got in Division I alone, 360 schools, I mean, I think it's this. The commercial outcomes that are leading to all of the preamble, Warren, that you gave is sort of happening up here. And principally in football and a bit in men's basketball, and really much less so in the other sports. So what we're wrestling with is how to be adaptive to these circumstances, which are hitting really just a band of programs around the country, and trying to figure out a model that would be addressing their particular needs, but at the same time preserving a model that's worked pretty well for this band, including for myself. I was a student athlete at Virginia, and I got a full ride there, graduated debt-free. All the life skills that you mentioned, Warren, came to me as a result of that experience, and that's most of D1. So the question is, how can we hold on to all the good there and then be responsive to the needs at the very top of the food chain and the ecosystem, so to speak. So our league is obviously focused on that. We're blessedly, I'll probably jinx it by saying this, not a defendant in the major litigations that Martin's league is dealing with, for example. But we're paying very close attention. And I do think, you know, as a big picture matter, what we've got going on here is this sort of colliding of the labor laws, the antitrust laws, and Title IX in the college sports space in ways that you just don't see anywhere in any other industry segment. And because there is disconsonance there, that's the reason for the ask that President Baker and Brian and the other members of the management team are putting forward to try to see if we can get some reconciliation of those federal laws in a way that gets the athletes what they deserve, particularly in that band of sports I referenced, that protects the NCAA from lawsuits every time it tries to pass a rule, because that's what we're up against right now, including in NIL, and preserves equity and make sure that our women's athletics programs get what they're entitled to under Title IX. So it's a very, very complex environment right now, and no clear answers. And my worry is that we may not be making decisions for ourselves. We may be having to react to decisions that are going to be made for us, principally by the courts.
Yep. I think that's a great point. And the other thing that you mentioned right at the beginning was that you were an athlete at Virginia. All 5 of us were college athletes at varying levels. Some of us were really bad Division III basketball players. Some of us were very good Division I basketball players. But those life skills, and I'll guarantee you everyone on the stage would say, had a radical impact on our success in life. And so that's what we do not want to lose when we talk about the future of college athletics. It is those opportunities and those life skills and connecting it to education, and that's where part of the conversation is missed as we think about all of the lawsuits and everything else. Martin, I will come to you next. I appreciate you wearing your UCLA gear. He was an athletic director at Boston College, but apparently the call of the West was too much, but we're thrilled that you came back.
The weather is much better.
Yes, it is.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear. And I'll get to conference realignment in a second, but again, you came up as an elite athlete. You've been in a senior position at Ohio State, at Boston College, and now UCLA. And as you think about both where college athletics is, but more importantly, the next 5 to 10 years, what is it that strikes you as sort of priorities for your institution?
Well, one, I want to thank everybody for being here. 8:30 in the morning, starting off. You didn't have to be here, and you did. So kudos to everybody here. 5:30 Pacific time, up early. And also, it's a pleasure to be with you, Warren, as we were colleagues at Boston College. And then we have a UCLA alum on the panel, and Val, right? So we got a Bruin here too. So Val is
My law school alma mater.
Law school alma mater. So it's a pleasure to be with a fellow Bruin. You know, I've had the perspective of being a student athlete, being in the Big Ten before at Michigan State and Ohio State, being in the ACC at Boston College, now being at UCLA, in the Pac-12 currently, going to the Big Ten in August 2nd, 2024. And what I have seen is the needs of our student athletes have changed. And that's something that I think we don't talk about enough, especially when you think about NIL and some of the benefits of NIL. You know, I've seen our student athletes do wonders with the NIL that they receive. I can give you so many countless examples of using NIL to pay for your family to come see you travel and play. That's something that I think student athletes deserve. I think every student athlete has a right to have their family be able to watch them perform. You've been watching them since they were 5 and 6, 7 years old. Especially if you're part of an economic engine that drives value to your institutions, why wouldn't you be able to do that and have your family still support you? A lot of our student athletes send money home and help out because they had that support system that helped them grow and become the athlete that they are. And so I think we don't talk enough about the value and the needs of our student athletes and how that's changed and that's evolved. Just like inflation, everything goes up, the cost for student athletes goes up. And what have we done to address that? So, you know, I think that's been something that I think we need to talk more about, and you'll hear more stories about that. I think also I've seen consolidation in this space. You know, that's what some of the realignment, I know we'll talk about that too, but you know, I think college athletics is business, and it's a business. And I think that the more that we run from that, the worse off we're gonna be. We have to treat it as such. Now, it's a business that also has components of education and development, and those are the things we don't want to lose. Those are really important. We all were benefits of being a part of a team and doing that, but we've got to treat it more, and in our role as athletic directors, you got to treat it more like a business and understand the value it brings and how we allocate resources and run it to where we can be a plus and a benefit to the institution at large.
And it's great that the perfect segue to business as we turn to Tommy, right? When the first time I was up here on a panel talking about the rights of college athletes and name, image, and likeness and whether they had a legal right to that and all of that stuff, or figuring out the Jeremy Bloom and O'Bannon case, Tommy would never be on stage. It would be something that, we can't possibly sort of have that discussion. And now you're here representing Altius Partners. Tell us a little bit about both that and from your perspective, how this new landscape is sort of evolving, right? The NIL and compensation and everything else, and how that's playing a role in college athletics.
Yeah, no, for sure.
You're on.
It's a great lead-in, Warren. You know, I'd say if you think about where we are today, in a lot of ways, the old model of college athletics, I think it's fair to say, is pretty much dead. And the new model of college athletics has yet to be born. And so we're in this very strange interim period. And what our company does, you know, we are helping people navigate this interim period as their strategic advisors, and we're helping them simultaneously prepare for the various permutations of future models that may come to be. And we're spending all day, every day thinking about that. I mean, Martin can speak to this well. I was on campus until just last January. As much as the top leaders at these institutions and conferences would like to be spending 100% of their time thinking about these big existential issues, Martin's got coaches to work with, athletes to please, donors to keep happy, in addition to thinking about these big existential issues. So we said, let's get a bunch of smart people together and let's spend all of our time thinking about this and let's go serve our clients. And we have 42 Division I athletics departments at this point that have hired us to be strategic consultants for them, as well as a number of national brands who are thinking about or have already entered the college sports marketing space in a different way now through athletes. So we're working with them as well. And yeah, the world is changing very, very quickly. And I think the more we can be talking about these things out in the open and behind closed doors both and build this new model, the better.
So as this new model evolves and there's a shift of some form of compensation coming from the institutions to the athletes who are producing the labor and the entertainment, there's been a lot of musical chairs. Schools are moving around to follow primarily football contracts, but large money. And clearly there's been some impact on the athletes who now have different travel schedules than they used to, away from class, all sorts of other restrictions on their sort of time. And so we're seeing, as Tommy said, we're in this middle period between how it used to be and where we're going, and we need bright minds, panelists, this audience, candidly, to help this industry sort of find its next space. And Val, you're running a major conference. How is this game of sort of musical chairs, because I know that you're not immune from this, right? So when Boston College leaves the Big East and goes to the ACC, and there's movement in legal cases, and the Pac-10 has some radical changes. How are you as a conference commissioner and someone who is a high-profile leader within this industry, how are you sort of handling and trying to address some of these things?
Well, as it relates to realignment, you know, we've got really nothing in the hopper right now at the Big East. We've had a lot of inbound inquiries about schools that would like to become part of our conference. Our presidents have not seen fit at this point to bring in any of those that have inquired. You know, we like what we have just in terms of a number. I do think there's, in college sports, because you're kind of capped the number of games you can play. I'll use basketball as an example. Mm-hmm. You can only play somewhere between 28 and 30 games right now because of NCAA rules. And so the more schools that you add to a conference, the less likely it is that you're going to play everybody a regular number of times. I know it sounds sort of operational and maybe sort of lesser in comparison to other concerns. But you know, using our league as an example, we've only got 11 schools. You play everybody twice. It's home and away. We call it the double round robin. And why does that matter? Because it really has helped us strengthen our rivalries and the experience of the athletes, because the travel's pretty good. Yep. And sort of gives the basketball selection committee a truer sense of the strength of our league and particular teams. Again, I know it sounds minor compared to some of the other bigger issues you flagged earlier, but those are the kinds of things that you talk about when you're in, you know, in a league board meeting like mine. You know, as you said, what happens sort of to everybody else does affect a particular league. You know, I'm frequently on calls with other commissioners. We're following closely what's happening. You know, I worry for our league, and I'm sure colleagues would share it. You know, the future of the basketball tournament is critically important, and Brian can attest to this because the NCAA, as a single entity, their national budget comes principally from March Madness. I mean, it's those 16 days in March that are providing the ticket sales revenue, the media revenue, and basically are the core of the NCAA sponsorship program. That could change, we hope, with sort of this interest in women's sports. Yes. It may create some incremental revenue streams for the national office. But it's basically, you know, what Brian and his team are doing is funded by March Madness dollars. So I think it's in everybody's interest to hold March Madness. Maybe I'll leave it with this, Warren. How we hold that event together, how we keep it this event that brings the country together is, you know, everyone's filling out their brackets, cheering for their alma mater, big or small. In men's basketball, we've been blessed because there's sort of just enough parity from top to bottom to create upsets that get everybody talking. Women's basketball, I've been involved with women's basketball for many years. We're not quite there. You're still going to see a domination by the top schools. You're not going to see a 1-16 game where the 16 is going to upset the 1. But in men's basketball, you can see that, and it's energizing. And I think it's, you know, it's something that I know as a basketball league. Yep. You know, to your point, we're pretty focused on, you know, what's it going to take to hold that together. Will tournament expansion, is that necessary? If it does, you know, how far could we go there without destroying the essence of an event which is probably one of the best basketball events in the world and one of the best sports events in the country.
So it's again nicely teed up for Brian. So I will come to you and Martin. You're next on conference realignment. But when the NCAA thinks about its future, right? When I talk about $16 billion for college athletics in general, huge amounts from BCS and football. And as Val appropriately said, March Madness is the revenue that drives the NCAA. What is it that you guys are looking at in terms of both opportunities for the membership and for the organization, thinking about how to protect that, but also some of the challenges that could come as schools are moving around? There are at least people talking about, do some of these Power 2 or 4 schools pull football out of the NCAA? How do you protect college basketball? How are you sort of preparing for that? And I know that Governor Baker, sorry, I still call him Governor Baker, has released a proposal with some ideas in the fall that the conferences and schools are sort of taking a look at. But how do you protect this engine to help support all of the other great things that the NCAA does for college athletics?
Well, I think Val said it. The men's March Madness is the crown jewel, and that's what needs to be protected. I think there's probably some minor modifications that we could do to keep the essence of that, but make sure that we get as many good teams in that as possible. I know Charlie's talked a little bit about publicly. That would be a relatively small expansion if there was one, nothing like 96 or anything else. But I think there's probably some modifications we can do as the conferences get to be, big, 18 teams. Well, finishing 8th in an 18-team league is not necessarily the same as finishing 8th in a 12-team league, right? So I think there's some things that we can do to the tournament to protect it. But at its core, the Project D1 proposal that you alluded to was about how do we maintain a national association that does more for student athletes, but keeps everybody together at a minimum with the men's and women's basketball tournaments. And so that has 3 main components. The first 2 are relatively non-controversial. It's remove the caps so that Martin can do more for their student athletes and not be limited by a national rule. And 2 is allow the schools to engage directly in NIL contracts so that it doesn't have to be intermediated through third parties. And we think that would do a lot for smart, forward-thinking people like Martin and Val and their leagues and teams to be able to do a lot more for their student athletes at all levels, at UCLA all the way down to, other schools that might be closer to home. The third part is about creating the differentiation in rules, as Val alluded to, that the number of games for the Big East and the Big Ten might need to be different than it is for other conferences that don't have the budget, that don't have the TV deals and stuff like that. And what we wanted to do was create a separation to allow those schools and conferences to change the rules a little bit. If they want to put radios in the football helmets, they should be able to do that without forcing some of the other schools to do that. We think that that kind of formal separation of the group that Val talked about from the rest of D1 while maintaining core standards on things like academic eligibility and things like that is a way to keep the whole organization together, at least for March Madness, while giving schools the flexibility, schools and conferences, the flexibility they need to run their programs in the best interest of their student athletes.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
And a lot to do.
It is. And it's just a proposal. We value the input of everybody in the community to make it better. And obviously, as Charlie says, no proposal survives a legislative body intact when it was made, and we wanted to start the conversation.
Hey, Warren, can I just jump in? Because on the second piece of President Baker's letter having to do with NIL and the role of the schools with NIL is not without controversy. I've been involved for many years at the NCAA level and trying to figure out how NIL, which is basically college speak for endorsement deals, how that can work in a space where athlete acquisition isn't otherwise regulated like it is in the pros. And how we manage that in a world where you're recruiting athletes, how do we prevent bidding wars and the bad things that go along with bidding wars? And so that is right now a hot topic. And if you study the Tennessee-Virginia Attorneys General ruling from last week, that's probably the hottest topic right now in our space is how do you deal with recruiting now and the role of the collectives and what they're able to do and what the school can and can't do vis-a-vis the collectives and the athletes in terms of NIL deal making, but more importantly, payments. I think where we're going to get to is that the facilitation and the involvement is probably going to be okay, but as long as it's not a direct payment by the school to the athlete for the NIL endeavor. That's kind of where the third rail is right now, because that's employment. Yep. And that whole issue, I would just say, that's the core of this, is what happens if this model goes to an employment model and a court decrees that they are now entitled to a minimum wage, overtime, workers' comp, and all the benefits that come out of employment, ability to organize, what that means for athletic departments like Martin's in terms of bargaining with different groups of athletes. That to me is really, when you start talking about the future of college athletics, that's it. That's the question. If and when this goes to employment, what that means for every sport.
And those last 2 comments from Brian and Val, I think, highlight spectacularly where we are and where we're going. the previous NCAA administration, and I'll speak just for myself, did a pretty good job of sticking their head in the sand and unwilling to address some of these issues for decades. And that has put us where we are today. What's fantastic about Charlie and the team is bringing in new ideas and willing to admit that change is needed and coming forth with a proposal. And as Brian alluded to, it may not be perfect, it may not be where we go. Val and others may have some questions or concerns about stuff that's in there, but for the first time since I've been doing these panels for 30 years, we're having real conversations about where we're going with an acknowledgement of what's actually happening out there as opposed to pretending it's not happening. And that's why we can be optimistic about what the future leads, is because we now are transparent in those conversations. And we can now debate the merits of NIL and how that should be enacted and where we need to go from here. Martin, I would certainly be remiss if I didn't raise at least UCLA leaving the West Coast to join the Big Ten, and sort of how that fits into your institution's mission and vision, right? It's a public institution in California, and now you're joining a primarily Midwest conference. Some of the reasons are obvious, but can you tell us a little bit about, from the big picture, how your institution thought this would benefit your students at large?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of reasons. One, we're more connected than ever before. So, geography doesn't mean the same thing as it did even 10 years ago as far as how we're all connected. But you come to UCLA to compete against the best, to be the best, right? And if you're an elite athlete, you want a great education, which UCLA is the #1 public institution in the country. And you want to compete as an athlete against the best. You want the best competition. You want to see how you stack up. And so from an academic and athletic perspective, looking at the Big Ten, very strong academically, and then athletically, I think is the best conference in the country. So first and foremost, we serve our student athletes. That's what we do. That's what we're in the business of doing. One, you think of NIL. NIL 3 years ago wasn't a factor. Now it is. So if you're sitting in my chair, how important is NIL? We have 700 student athletes. We have over 350 of our student athletes have NIL deals. So as an athletic director, as a leader, I'm looking at the base that I serve. Over half of them now are participating in NIL. Well, when you're in a conference that is across the country, that you have more opportunities to be seen West Coast-wise, you don't have the same game times. You're not seen on the East Coast. I was in Boston on the East Coast. I didn't watch West Coast as much. That's real. That's a factor. Well, now NIL becomes more important. Being exposable to brands and opportunities across the country, driving your engagement with fans, alumni, that becomes more important. NIL, that plays a major factor in that. And then resources. At the end of the day, people don't want to say it, but you need resources to support your students and do what they want to do to be successful. This doesn't just operate on its own. There's a bottom line to it. And if you want to support all of our sports, and at UCLA, we have a proud tradition in our Olympic sports. We have 121 national championships, second most in the country. We want to provide those same opportunities for softball and women's soccer and men's tennis that we do for basketball. And if you do that, and you need that resource base to continue to do the things that help your student athletes compete and be successful. So resources is part of it too. And then you look at just where college athletics is going. I truly think it's a new deal. That's kind of what I call it. There's a new deal with the relationship, the economic benefits of the student athlete and the institution. It's a new deal. It's a new day. And it's also a partnership. You're going to see more collaboration with our student athletes as far as some of the things that we're doing. Now when you're talking about theme nights at basketball games and you have high-profile student athletes, you're meeting with them now to talk about, if we do this, what will you be able to do, whether it's signing autographs, bringing a certain group of people to the game. it's a collaboration now. It's not the same. You know, and it's similar as you see in the pros with professional associations and looking at that. You've got to think more like a partnership and collaboration. And so college athletics is in consolidation mode. It's happened before. This is not something new. But we look at it as we want to position UCLA student athletes for success and greatness. That's what UCLA is about. Those four words or letters are known worldwide. And we got to continue that championship pedigree. And the way that we do that is competing against the best, increasing our resource base, providing more NIL opportunities for our student athletes, and being successful. And so those are some of the reasons that we made the move.
Well done. Well done.
UCLA is second most to who in national championships?
Thank you,
I don't
Stanford.
know. This is about those four letters, man.
And Stanford is in the
Stanford is
house.
the answer.
And Tom, I'm going to come to you. Val mentioned a case that sent shockwaves through the five of us in our professional lives and probably wasn't understood as much by the masses in terms of Tennessee and Virginia bringing a lawsuit against the NCAA. The NCAA ostensibly had a restriction that NIL could only be used for existing athletes at a school. So if Martin has a women's basketball player already on campus and she is looking for NIL deals, that would be allowed under the new NCAA rules. What was not allowed was the ability for the women's basketball coach or Martin or someone else to say, here's what the NIL opportunities are for you if you attend UCLA. And that restriction that the NCAA had was challenged by University of Tennessee and Virginia, and a preliminary injunction was issued basically allowing it, saying that it is okay or it's not okay to restrict that opportunity so that college athletes have a right to understand what their NIL opportunities before they enroll at a school. Did I appropriately summarize that?
With one maybe caveat that the injunction that was granted only applies to third parties negotiating NIL deals with athletes.
It can't come from the school itself.
Correct, and they can communicate the opportunities that their current athletes are receiving. They still can't negotiate on behalf of a prospect.
So Tommy, like, what does this mean to this space? You are expert. You are not beholden by the NCAA or a school specific in terms of here's what we think is going to happen. So from your perspective as someone coming in, sort of overseeing this area of compensation, which isn't coming directly from a school, what are you seeing that this could mean?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if we're speaking plainly here, what this injunction allows third parties to do has already been happening across the country for months between collectives and prospects, frankly, in the sports of football and men's basketball. It's already been happening. So, in some ways it brings it from the cover of darkness maybe more into the light of day. But I think the reason it's a very big deal is because I'd say it's by far to date the biggest shot across the bow of the NCAA, in the sense that it's essentially, I mean, Val said it earlier, the NCAA has a hard time creating or enforcing any of its own rules right now, including some very basic rules regarding how talent is distributed, recruiting. So I think that's the reason it's a big deal, and I do think the ripple effects that are yet to be seen, the NCAA will respond hopefully in short order, but we still don't know exactly what it means and what further ripples it will cause. For the time being, it honestly hasn't changed a lot.
Warren, let me add something real quick too. Just from the tenor, I want to make sure I know a lot of you are students.
Yes.
This is also a great time for college athletics.
Yes.
This really is. Anytime there's chaos and change, there's beauty that comes on the other side. This is going to be great. It's going to benefit student athletes in ways. There are going to be jobs and opportunities that we maybe haven't had before. I'm looking at financial analysts now. We're looking at data content creators. You're looking at branding. You're looking at some different things, a part of the college athletic space that we didn't have before, that there are opportunities for all of you to get in this space. But I just want to say that because I think sometimes we get too negative about what is going on. This is not a negative. This is a good thing. This is a relationship. This is a partnership. It's a new day. It's a new deal.
Let me pile on. It's not just gonna be better. It is better.
It is better.
It is better today. The competition's incredible. The level of play is incredible, and the athletes are benefiting directly from this, and it's awesome. I met a Division III women's volleyball player who has an endorsement deal with Lululemon, She learned how to read contracts. She learned how to, like, the business skills that these kids are learning way earlier than I learned them is incredible.
Absolutely.
And all of what we're talking about is making an amazing system better and more future-proof. It's not that, like, the core of college athletics is strong and amazing. And
I just feel we needed to say that because some of these times these panels get like, woe is me, and the doom and gloom, and it's like, no, like this is good.
Yeah.
This is good.
Yeah, and this is the byproduct of the change that has come is the benefit, we hope, for the athletes in the industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would pile on to the pile on and just say, just remind.
I'll just crawl under the
Yeah, to
podium
pick
now.
up your comment about, you know, and I was a beneficiary of this system. The leadership development components of this collegiate experience for women athletes especially is proven. You know, I mean, the ability to be part of a team, to all the things you get from playing sports, and it's demonstrated. I mean, I've been on many a panel with other female colleagues across industry sectors, and many had a background in organized sports, so they came up through this. And while there was a dark cloud, back to turning the negative into a positive a few years ago with the equity flap around the women's basketball tournament in San Antonio. It was a mess. I think it was somewhat COVID-driven because staff was scrambling to try to put on these 2 basketball tournaments in a bubble, but the ball got dropped. It got the scrutiny that it deserved, and then it was made better. And now, kind of, women's sports has just picked up and gone on to another level here, in terms of the visibility, you know, the reinforcing what all of these experiences provide to these athletes, et cetera. So I do agree with Martin. I'm glad you made the point here too, because we're dealing with a really complicated space right now, but the good things about college sports are growing, and they need to endure.
And I would even say in the collective space, there are silver linings to that as well. Athletes are more motivated now to engage with the networks that exist at their colleges than they ever have been. I think that's been a struggle. Athletes are heads down 4 or 5 years training, not engaging maybe as much as they'd like in career development opportunities and getting to know the people within their university's network, and they are more motivated now to do that, and they are in different ways, which is positive as well.
We have a whole bunch of optimists here on a Friday morning, which is outstanding. I'll sort of turn to sort of a quasi-lightning round. Since you're all optimistic, we're also trying to educate. I'll go straight down the line. I'll start with you, Brian. What is one of the top things that you think is sort of misunderstood by the general public about college athletics? Is there one thing that you would say, man, they just don't understand this, or I wish they had a better handle on X?
The leadership development. I was in the Navy. I'm not a 20-year management consultant. A decade in the Navy, including that 20 years. And I learned as much from playing high school and college sports as I did in the military. Full stop. And that includes, you know, the football team at Martin School all the way down to D3 baseball, where I played.
My answer is how much this costs. I mean, there's so much attention around the revenue that's produced, again, by that band that I talked about earlier. But I don't think enough gets written about how much it costs, and Martin could speak to this better than anybody, to run an athletic department, to put on competitions, to pay for scholarships, to pay, I mean, billions of dollars every year go into scholarships and the related benefits here. And I do hope that if we get to a new model, I mean, that's what happens in the pros. There's an intense negotiation about revenue share, but the leagues are at least given some credit for what they pay to make the opportunity possible. And I worry that notion, most athletic departments are losing money. I know that's certainly the case at the lower levels. And so I hope we can, make sure that piece of the narrative gets the amplification it deserves.
Tommy?
I'd say there's a narrative that a lot of the people and the leaders involved in college sports, and that includes coaches, are like bad actors, bad people, bloodthirsty vultures or something, taking advantage of this. No, I'm about to get you, Mom. I'm about to get you. No, and I think that's a misconception. I mean, I think really, I was actually here in Boston when I got the call from Bernard Muir, Stanford Athletics Director. He said, hey, UCLA and USC are out. And I was like, what is that? Out of what? Out of the Pac-12. I was mad at Martin. But also, like, Martin is a rational actor. He's in this for the right reasons. And every single athletics director, coach, administrator, NCAA personnel that I've met is in this for the right reasons. There's a great mission here that I think people are supportive of. And they're rational actors acting within a broken system.
Martin?
I wish people would understand the value of college athletics and the impact it makes on young people. We are former student athletes, so we know the teamwork, the grit, the togetherness, the sacrifice that it takes to reach a common goal. I think the benefits don't get talked about enough of what you learn if you're a student athlete at an institution. You hear all the things about the money, about the expenses, about the revenues, but you don't hear, it's a transformational experience as a student athlete. It changes lives. It will change your life. And we need to talk more about that, and that's something that I don't think people fully understand and appreciate.
So I agree with you, but I will circle back to anybody who wants this question is, you've got some, I'll just speak for myself, a bad Division III athlete, right? I didn't have to travel far to find competition better than me. I found it, in my dorm, right? So, but the skills that I still learned, right? I didn't feel any more pressure at the foul line than I would if I was on national TV on March Madness with a logoed apparel, right? I wanted to win as much as anybody, right? So how does one reconcile those skills and that education from the rest of it that comes along with college athletics? As Val and others appropriately said, I'm not talking about 1,000 schools, I'm not talking about every sport, but for some of those athletes, and candidly, some of those predominantly sports of minority students providing opportunities for others, how does one reconcile the education piece with sort of this chase for revenue? And that's coming from someone who absolutely loves the concept of and value of college athletics. And that's the one thing that I struggle with. Anybody want to save me here? Or?
Both can be true. Yeah. Both can be true. Yep. You can derive benefit from the experience where you learn resiliency, you learn getting back up when you've been knocked down, but you can also want to better your situation financially because you're putting it on the line and you have a finite amount of time. When I talk to people about what our student athletes utilize NIL for and give them some of the reasons and how they use it, the perspective changes a bit because we all were a college student where you struggled with different things. And so if we can help you and make that better, why wouldn't we do it? That's kind of how I look at it.
No, I completely agree. And I think there's a recognition as a fellow bad student or D3 student athlete that I didn't have to fly cross country. I didn't have to play on odd times to make TV windows and stuff like that. And I don't think that those folks necessarily are earning the same amount of exposure and revenue for their schools as some of the other folks. And so we need a model where, Martin and folks can pay for the families to travel, right? Mm-hmm. That they can, do an unpaid internship with a stipend from the school after they graduate because they couldn't do that while they were playing big-time college athletics. I could go abroad as a D3 student athlete. I could do an unpaid internship in the summer. A high-level D1 athlete can't do those things, and we need a different model to take care of those student athletes so that they can have, in many ways, the same experiences that a bad D3 athlete has.
I'm just curious, Brian's in charge of data and business analytics for the NCAA, and wondering if you have access to my transcript when you call me a bad student because you're spot on with that.
I said that too. Yeah.
I want to incorporate some of the audience Q&A into my next question. My question, sort of quasi lightning round, is what is the one thing that keeps you up at night when thinking about the future of college athletics? Val alluded to the potential for college athletes to be deemed employees. Some questions talk about football breaking away from the NCAA, potentially even away from schools themselves as being intellectual property employees playing games. What is the one thing that sort of keeps you up at night most? And Martin, I'll come back this way, and you can start first this time.
The thing that keeps me up is getting further away from the education benefit of college athletics. That's the one concern that I have. The more things change and you move away from, you come to college to get a degree that sets you up for life. And we've got to make sure that still stays the #1 goal and objective of a college student athlete. And I get concerned the more the lawsuits, the more things that occur, that it will drive a wedge in between the academic, educational benefit piece and the financial reality of running a business piece. because right now we do both, and it's becoming harder to do that.
I co-sign that.
I do too. I'll give a different answer too, though, which I think I worry that as this thing continues to consolidate, you hear numbers thrown around like 30 or 40 schools that are going to play big time college football if there is at some point a breakaway here. I worry that over time that erodes the value of the entity overall. I don't think that it's a good thing for college sports, or even if we want to just make this about football for a second. The Northeast used to be the epicenter of college sports and college football until the 1960s. Ivy League was big-time college sports. Ivy League de-emphasized athletics. And now if you look at TV viewership numbers per capita for college football, the Northeast is not good. And I worry that as the thing consolidates further, that decades down the line, we've devalued the overall entity and taken away a lot of what makes it special.
My answer would be the future of Olympic sports in an environment where schools, in their quest to stay, quote, competitive in sports like basketball especially, can't make ends meet because of the cost point that I just made earlier, and then have to make hard decisions. I hope it doesn't get to that point. I don't think schools are bluffing when they say, well, if it's pay for play, then I'm going to have to, in order to pay over here, then I'm going to have to cut over here. I don't think that's a bluff. And I hope it doesn't happen. But I think the USOPC is rightly concerned about the future of collegiate sports as the training ground for the Olympic movement. And so I think that one we're going to have to pay very close attention to.
I agree with everybody. The thing that keeps me up at night is the harassment that these student athletes who are now public figures get on social media, particularly with regards to sports wagering. They are public figures, but they're also 18 to 22-year-olds, and they take a lot of crap, and they're in many cases not very well equipped to handle it, and we need to do more to protect them.
That's a big issue.
That's a good answer.
That's a huge issue.
I'm being told that our time is wrapping up, but I'm going to take moderator since we started late. I'm going to ask one last question really quickly. Right? On our theme of optimism, I'd like a sentence or two from each of you. Give everyone who is thinking about the future of college athletics a message of hope. One thing they can hang their hat on that will keep us positive about where we're going and the value of this important institutional role.
I'm going to have to go first. Everything we've talked about. These young kids are getting incredible opportunities. They're learning a lot, and they're going to be our future leaders. And I meet these kids like that Division III women's volleyball player, and our society is in good hands with these young people as our future leaders.
Val.
To the audience, particularly those of you who are here because you might want to work in college sports, or you're already working in college sports and want to keep moving through the system, we need you. I mean, this industry is as good as its leaders, and it's hard work, but it's not going away. It's the biggest producer of sports annually in our country. And if any of you have an interest in joining in and helping solve complex problems and being the college sports leaders of tomorrow, I would just say we need you, and thanks for being here.
I'd add, I think part of the way we got here was by ignoring complex problems, and I think reason for optimism is we are finally talking about solutions to those complex problems and designing a future.
Excellent. Martin?
There are so many opportunities in college athletics for you. We need leadership. We need people that think differently, that haven't been a part of it, quite frankly, to come in and help us shape the future of college athletics. So I think there are unbelievable opportunities, and you want to run to something that you can impact and change, and you can do that in college sports.
On behalf of Martin, Tommy, Val, Brian, the student leaders, thank you so much for joining us this morning on the future of college athletics. Have a wonderful conference.